Hey everybody, this is Mike Nelson, the Mike Nelson Show. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure to subscribe. We have over 400 subscribers. I want to thank everybody's already, watched the videos and subscribed. It's been pretty awesome. All you heavy metal fans out there or hard rock fans, have a lot of cool guests coming up. But today I got Ed Mowery, legendary death metal musician. How you doing today, Ed?
I'm doing good, man. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. So, how did it all start out for you musically? When did you get into music? When did you decide I'm going to be a musician?
I decided that about 14, 15 years old. Was living in Los Alamos, New Mexico, where the nuclear bomb was invented. And yeah, I had a friend of mine that was all into Metal Church and Slayer and Metallica and Megadeth and Sabbath, all kinds of different bands from back then. And I started watching him play when I go over and hang out with him. And then I was like, "Give me that thing! Start showing me how to make this happen." And that's what it started it all. I was 15 years old.
And you started out on guitar or bass?
I actually started on guitar, and I moved over to bass before a band I was in before I was in Nocturnus, and we couldn't find a bass player, and all these places here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, were asking us to play, and we didn't have a bass player to play. So finally, I said, "Screw it, I'm going to move over to bass," and so we could start doing shows, and just sort of stuck there for a while.
What was your first band?
My very first band, believe it or not, was back then. It was called Equinox of all band names, and it was when I first started playing guitar. So I mean, we all knew probably one or two songs each, and got together and played. And it's funny that Equinox was my first band because our new drummer Gabriel Lewandowski also played in a band called Equinox in Florida that has put a couple albums out back in the day.
So growing up in New Mexico, how do you think that shaped you as a musician? I've been out to New Mexico. I really love the area. How do you think that shaped you as a musician?
Well, back when I first started playing and when I first moved down from Los Alamos to Albuquerque, the scene here was really popping. I mean, it was punk, metal, hard rock, and everybody would go to everybody's shows. It was a really cool scene. I don't know what happened between now and then, but but yeah, that's pretty much what got me going and you know got me cutting my teeth playing shows and recording and doing demos and stuff like that.
So you moved to Albuquerque in the late 80s, early 90s?
Yeah, it was actually 80 in 88. I moved to Albuquerque from Los Alamos. I graduated high school in 88 and moved down right after.
So how did you eventually end up in Nocturnus in 1992? The Florida death metal scene. Florida is pretty far away from New Mexico. So how did you end up in Nocturnus?
Well, believe it or not, Fallen Idols, the band I was in Albuquerque, we had moved to Seattle of all places. I don't know why we moved there, but we did, and it worked out pretty good for us, for a little while. But then the band kind of fell apart, and um, at the time I was playing with this drummer, and we heard through the grapevine that Nocturnus was looking for a bass player, and I thought, well, I'm not playing with this guy. We're on our way moving to Tampa at the time, and within a week or two after us getting there, that had fallen apart, and a friend of mine grabbed a hold of me and said, "You need to go try out for Nocturnus to make this trip worth your while from Seattle to Tampa." And then he took me to my first audition. And actually, Chris Anderson, who played bass on Thresholds, recorded the bass tracks on Threshold, taught me three songs before I actually went in and auditioned for him.
So
So
you moved out to Tampa 92. The Florida death metal scene was kind of at the height right there, right? 91, 92. How big was the Florida death metal scene when did you see how big it was when you got there?
yeah, when I first got there before we went on tour, I mean, it was hopping. Just about every show I go to would be full of people. We went to a Tampa Bay Death Fest, and Deicide headlined it, and it was sold out. And yeah, it was really hopping back then. That was when Glenn first burnt the cross into his forehead. But yeah, they really kicked ass at that show, and there was a lots of other shows that I had went to, I'd gone to before we went on tour. But it was strange as we got back from the European Thresholds tour, and it would just seem to start dying off as soon as we got back. Because I start going to shows, and I'm like, wait a second, where's all the people? So certain bands would bring people in, certain bands wouldn't. It just sort of started dying out. I think right around the end of '92. going into the later years.
So you toured first with Nocturnus before you recorded that EP.
Yeah, yeah, we toured all Europe. We were there for 7.5 weeks, and there's a time of my life. I mean, it was you know playing in front of a crowd of people, and then the next day playing in front of 10 people. It was kind of hit or miss. We actually were right behind Obituary and Napalm Death on the same tour track, so we kind of I think we kind of took the batter end of that tour. But yeah, man, we had some really good shows over there. I wouldn't trade it in for anything. I mean, it taught me a whole lot about the business and how to be on tour.
So recording that EP the next year, any thoughts on that? How was that the first time you'd actually recorded with Nocturnus?
Yeah, that was the first time I recorded with Nocturnus, and the guys had already split ways with my Browning, and we had James Marcinek on drums. We did those two songs, Possess the Priest and Mummified, and I'd actually written part of Mummified. So that was like my first recording with him and my first stuff I'd written with him.
And did Nocturnus tour after this, or you guys kind of stopped after '93?
After '93, it was some of us wanted to tour, some of us didn't. So it ended up, we ended up splitting up because nobody wanted to go on tour. That was important.
And like you said, death metal was kind of dying out then by '93.
Yeah, by '93 in the United States, it started dying out a little bit, and I mean, grunge was really taking over at that time. And I mean, the only band I remember really sticking out is as far as metal when grunge really took off was Pantera. They were huge. I mean, selling out arenas during the grunge era was unheard of for a metal band. It was it's pretty wild, man. And of course I went to every show I could of their shows, and I mean they were great. They were
Even
awesome.
like Metallica stopped for a couple of years there in the mid '90s.
Yeah.
They didn't
Yeah.
tour because it was just a tough market for metal.
Yeah, totally. And solo guitar too, but I think Metallica sort of dropped having solos on every song for one album, and a lot of bands were doing that, and I was like, then there's just no way I'm going to play in a metal band without solos.
So fast forward to Ethereal Tomb. You recorded this album with Nocturnus in the late '90s. When did Nocturnus form again? Then
In the late '90s, we did. I'm sorry, we in the late it was in 2000 when we did Ethereal Tomb. Sean and Lou had gotten together and were just messing around, writing a couple things, and then I caught wind of it, and we started talking about possibly doing a demo with me singing and playing bass, and then Mike Davis caught wind of it too, and he wanted to be a part of it. So we were like, well, we might as well just go ahead and do a record, and we ended up doing that at Audio Hammer Studios Audio Lab Studios in Tampa. And it was quite an experience, man. We sent our first demo off to Season of Mist that we did at Audio Lab, and they sent us right back into the studio just a couple months later to record everything that we had. And,
this is the first time you sang before.
Yeah, I actually sang backups on the EP. I did backup vocals on that. And so those guys already knew I could bust out the death metal vocals, and but as far as very first record I'd ever done and very first band I'd ever been lead singer in, so that was quite a step up, man.
And talk to me about "Search for the Trident." One of my favorite tracks on the album. Any thoughts on that song?
Oh yeah, I wrote most of that song. That was probably the song I had most to do with on the whole record. I did write almost all the lyrics. Lou wrote some of them, but on Search for the Trident, Mike Davis and I had sat down, and he's like, look, man, you need to write something that's almost all you. Let's start putting this together. And that's how Search for the Trident came about. And the Trident is actually a hieroglyph on the side of a mountain down in South America. And we were dreaming that we'd be on all the band members on a boat riding down, and you see this big mountain with the trident, and then the song starts off, and that's pretty much how that song came to be.
So after this album, did you guys tour around the world, or what happened after that?
We did a few shows, and then Lou decided to leave the band, and it wasn't very long after that everybody was starting to lose interest, and that's actually pretty much around the time that I thought up of Tiwanaku and thought up of doing my own band. And without the Nocturnus guys, and that's pretty much the way it went from there on.
So the band broke up for good there. Of course, now we have Nocturnus AD, but do you ever think you'll play with those guys again?
I'll never say never, but a lot of guys have moved on with their lives, so I would probably say no, but I've never say never.
So you formed Tiwanaku after this, and what this is like 2003, right? You formed the band.
Yeah, 2003. Mm-hmm.
So how did the idea come about to form this band?
I'd been wanting to start another band because I wanted to go on a tour, and so I wanted to start this band so we could do that. And already knew the concepts I wanted to do, the paranormal, sci-fi, science fact, and we actually more go towards the science fact thing than sci-fi. But yeah, that's when I started the band, and ever since then, it's been quite a ride, man. I mean, it's been crazy.
And you played in Leech Law and another band. Tell me more about that.
Actually, Rick Renstrom was doing leads for us on the Tiwanaku demo, and Wade Black was in the band at the time, and him and I were trading vocals. And Richard Christie had also jumped in to do the first demo with Tiwanaku, and those three guys were also in Leash Law, so they just said, why don't you just come play guitar with us? When we won't have to go find somebody else, and that's how that all came about.
And so Tiwanaku has released a couple singles. You're finally going to release an album, Earth Base One. It's been almost 20 years, though, since the band formed. What took so long to finally release that first album?
Well, part of it was member changes and getting the right people in the band. But the biggest reason was I've got a lot of health issues. I had a whole bunch of spine surgery. I've had 31 surgeries total. Neck surgery, low back surgery, a whole bunch of different knee surgeries. And that pretty much took me out of the game for a while. And once I'd start feeling better, we'd try to start picking it up again. And then just in 2019, I had major neck surgery and major low back surgery. And that pretty much fixed me. For the most part, I still have pains and stuff like that. But, when we're all old, we'll all have pains, of course. But but yeah, pretty much what's held us back was my health problems. And now that I'm fixed and, we're able to actually make something happen and go on tour and do the right things. Now's the perfect time.
Thoughts on the new album and singles? What can fans look forward to if they haven't heard your music? Any thoughts on it?
Well, you can expect death metal with a full-time keyboard player. Lots of guitar leads. Driving grooving rhythms and driving fast rhythms. Slayer beats. All kinds of different drum beats. It's basically I kind of call it old school death metal with modern drumming.
Any shows to promote or any touring plans for next year?
We do have plans to tour next year. We actually have a bunch of stuff on the table, but nothing's confirmed quite yet. So we're working on it really, really hard to we're all going to go out at least 5 or 6 times next year, I think. Between a couple of tours and whatever festivals may want to fly us in and have us play. But the one thing that we do have semi in concrete is a full South American tour at the end of next year.
And you've been doing this for a long time. Any thoughts on how how the rock and metal scene is today? It's changed so much, in these past 30 years. You've been in this for a long time. So what's your thoughts on how it's changed?
Man, it has changed huge. I mean, once the internet came in, I mean, I played music before there was an MP3, and back when there was no Pro Tools, you had to play the song from beginning to end perfectly. And if you didn't, you had to start over when you were recording music. Every once in a while, you'd find a real good engineer that knew how to punch in and could fix a part. But yeah, it was completely up to the musician to make sure that those records happened back in the day. And now you got Pro Tools where you play one part and you can copy and paste it over and over again and do what you have to do to put a song together. But we actually still record the old way.
Wow.
We still want to make sure we play the song all the way through, just so there's that feel there and not that mechanical computer robotic type of feel that a lot of music has these days. That that we're trying to stay away from it, but I mean it's almost impossible when you're using Pro Tools anyway. But but yeah, that's the big difference. And then once the MP3 came in, and I hate to say it, but Lars Ulrich was perfectly right about it all, man. I mean, it took a big whack at the music business, and I'm surprised music's still going these days sometimes, just because it's next to impossible to make money at it. You really got to be in this because you love it. You really do. And I mean, unless you're in a band that was already there, or one of the lucky bands that hit the lottery, you know, it's definitely completely different from back in the day. But the one great thing about it is with the touch of a button, you can have your music out to thousands of people. And back in the day, you had to record it and hope that maybe a distributor or a label would pick you up and put it out there for everybody to hear. But it was definitely a completely different animal back in the day.
And so where can the fans, listen to your music? Where can they find updates on the touring? Where can they find all that stuff?
They can find us on Facebook. Tiwanaku, it's a Facebook/Tiwanaku Metal. We also have our website, which is actually being reconstructed right now. It's also tiwanakumetal.com, which is TIWANAKU metal.com. And then you can also find us on Instagram. And that's Tiwanaku_official.
And where can people listen to the new singles?
The new singles, you can find them on YouTube. Just type in Tiwanaku. Visitor from Titan is the first single that came out about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And then we just had a lyric video followed with Ghost War, another song. Visitor from Titan is a true story that happened to me in the New Mexico mountains. The first contact, first sighting I ever really had of alien being. Basically, me and my friend were driving back up into the mountains after I'd had a gig here in Albuquerque, filling in for some friends. And we kept seeing this light up ahead of us. And we're like, what? Nothing else. No one's saying anything. Looking up ahead of us. And then we finally come around this bend, and this light's sitting right in front of my truck. And as soon as we got up to it, it went boom. It got even bigger. I mean, it was literally, 6 feet across, and it started shaking violently. And I'm like, whoa, what the hell is this thing? And I'm asking my old guitar player, Michael Estes. He was with me at the time. And I'm like, Mike, do you see that? And I'm sitting there staring at it, not even looking at him. And then all of a sudden, lightning bolts shot up from under this thing, and it shot up the mountain and out of sight. And I'm literally stopped in the middle of the road, and I look over at Mike, and he was, we were just completely. It took us like 5-10 minutes to start talking about it because we were in such shock of what we had seen. Wow. And then Ghost War was a dream I had of a war between our human reality and the paranormal side. Sort of had a weird dream about that one night, and woke up in the middle of the night and wrote it all down, and started writing the music for that one. And that one has stuck. That's the one song that's been in Tiwanaku from the beginning, for sure.
And the brand new album is going to be coming out. The first album is going to be coming out next month. And is it going to be released in all forms, CD and streaming? How's that going to be released?
Yeah, CD, vinyl, streaming. The vinyl we're just waiting on now. I think everything else they've got ready to go. And it's November 4th, 2022 is the day it's coming out, probably 12 minutes. Yeah, just right around the corner.
So very exciting time for Tiwanaku. Got a brand new album coming out, so make sure to go check it out. I want to thank you for coming on the show today, Ed.
Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Stay metal, everybody.